According to Eminent Domain and African Americans, a 2007 report for the Institute of Justice, it states that between 1949 and 1973, 2,532 projects were carried out in 992 cities that displaced 1 million people, 2/3 of which were Black people.
The Africville relocation was presented as a liberal and humanitarian measure to improve the living conditions of underprivileged people. What went wrong?
You're listening to Africville Forever. In Season 1, we told you the story of the destruction of my community.
They cheated us, and I'm one that was cheated.
If you don't move at a certain time, we'll bring out the bulldozers and push your shacks over.
In Season 2, we are exploring its rebirth.
I know we'd all fight to get back out there. We still call it home.
My name is Eddie Carvery III, and my grandfather, the original Eddie Carvery, has maintained the longest civil rights protest in North American history.
It's time that we looked at them wrongs and righted them.
He stood up for Africville since it was destroyed in the 1960s, refusing to leave the land. For too long, the Africville survivors and descendants have been divided, hampering our efforts to take back the land and rebuild our unique community. So please join us as we explore practical, inclusive solutions to reunite our people and once again rebuild our community. Can we get you to end on the note of, let's hear Africville Forever?
Africville forever and a day.
In this episode, we'll be talking to Kavon Ward, the first ever activist to fight and win back Black-owned land that was stolen in North America. Kavon used her skills as a lobbyist to start Justice for Bruce's Beach, a campaign to get land returned to descendants of Charles and Willa Bruce, whose property was unjustly seized by the city of Manhattan Beach in the early 1920s.
I had a vision which has been fully realized today. A vision that was once taken from a people be returned. A vision that something that had never been done before in history happened for the first time. I had a vision.
Ward has also co-founded Where Is My Land, a nonprofit dedicated to reclaiming Black-owned land. So if you have the opportunity, please check out her organization.
Thank you, Haley. The city of Palm Springs tonight set to continue talks about providing reparations for minority residents who were evicted from a plot of land known as Section 14 in the downtown area more than 55 years ago. About 200 structures were demolished and burned.
The excitement in speaking to someone like Miss Ward, is because she has gone through the struggle, gone through the darkness, listened to the people of Bruce's Beach's story and gravitated towards these people whose land were unjustly taken away from them. And in doing so, it gave her a newfound ability to fight for people whose voices were taken from them, who thought they had no hope. And the similarities with that in Africville, it struck a note with me. And so to know somebody on the outside came in and felt the pain of the people so greatly that she decided it was time to do something about it. And not only just to do something about it, she came out of that storm and saw the sunshine. The land was given back. It's not only my dream, but the dream of hundreds of descendants of Africville to wake up one morning on that land again. And for me, it's inspirational and it's hopeful. And I can't wait to dive deeper into conversation with Kavon and explore ways that I may be able to help my community witness the same thing. We're back, another episode of Africville Forever. Today we have a very special guest, and we want to welcome her with us today. So could you please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, what organization you work with, and maybe even some of the little achievements that you have garnished along the way on your journey, please?
Absolutely. My name is Kavon Ward. I am from New York City, New York, specifically Harlem, but I've lived in California for the past 8 years now. I am the founder of an organization called Where Is My Land, and also Justice for Bruce's Beach. I started Justice for Bruce's Beach in 2020, shortly after George Floyd was murdered. It is when I found out about a Black family that used to live in Manhattan Beach, California. Their names are Charles and Willa Bruce. They were Black entrepreneurs who owned land, beachfront land, and established a beachfront resort for Black people so that there was a space for them to feel invited and to enjoy leisure. That land was stolen from them under the guise of eminent domain by the city of Manhattan Beach. And so my goal was to get it back. And I was successful with that. In 2022, the land was officially transferred back to the Bruce family. And then they ultimately sold the land back to the county. I'm not happy with their decision to do that, but I'm happy that I was able to be a part of history. First time in American history that land was returned back to Black people. And so after that, when the governor decided that he wanted to return the land, I got a bunch of emails from people across the country asking if I could help them reclaim their land. And I figured, why not? Why I have the resources, I have the connections. Why not use that to help more Black people? Because I love my people. And so I started an organization called Where's My Land? And now we have about nearly 1,000 claims. But we are a small team of about 6 people because we are not funded the way we need to be. However, we're still making a lot of good progress. We are actually in the process of getting land returned to another family in California, in the city of Santa Monica. The city council just agreed and voted unanimously to look at recommendations for returning land and providing compensation for the family it was stolen from.
Geez. So first off, that,
incredible.
Yeah, no, that's huge. Like you said, that's part of history. So don't sell yourself short on any aspect of that. Maybe I could just ask, how that, obviously the process was long and there was highs and lows of the process, but coming to the end of it, what did you feel inside, as someone who did assist this family in getting their land back?
I felt a sense of pride, but more than anything, I felt more connected to the Most High than anything. And I felt like I was called to do it, right? When I think about the Bruce's case, and I think about how they had fought a couple of years back just to get the name of the park changed to Bruce's Beach, because that's all they thought could happen. Because land had never been returned. And so I felt like a sense of audacious courage to be like, okay, yeah, the plaque is fine, but where's the true remedy, right?
Yeah.
How are you going to make this family, and I won't say whole because they will never be made whole from what would happen to them, right? But how are you going to provide true repair and reparations? And so that feeling of just knowing that I was being used as a vessel was everything for me, right? And I took it seriously, and I made sure I connected with Source every morning to get my steps, to order my steps, because people always ask well, what was the process? And now that you've done it, what's the blueprint? And it's like, the blueprint, there is no blueprint. The thing that I did and I continue to do, and what I do now with this other case, is just I stay connected to Source every morning. When everyone's asleep, I'm up. I'm listening to get the next steps. And so while I have a team of folks who help, and the community definitely helps, just knowing that there is this space that I can go into, this realm that I go into, where I am just in this creative space that no one really understands until things are implemented, right? So to answer your question, I feel a lot of things, but after Bruce's Beach, I felt definitely like I was called to do this work, and I felt honored to be called.
Okay. Well, that's a beautiful answer. So after leaving such a valuable piece of property, that's destructive, so it's something it's been a long fight. This isn't just today. It wasn't tomorrow. The past is going to be tomorrow. And that's why it's good to know that there's other people having not that they're having these issues, but that Africville isn't going through it alone. There's being solutions that are being found to help people get their community back, get their land back. And, I guess that takes us back to that hope.
Yeah,
Right?
it takes us back. One of the things I always say is that, White people, they pass down generational wealth. People of color, specifically Black people, pass down generational trauma and fight to have to reclaim what was stolen. And the fight just for anything to just exist, in this world that doesn't want us.
Have you heard about Africville?
So I am familiar with Africville. I became familiar with it when you all reached out to my comms person. So she sent me a link and I read up on it. And it reminded me, I was telling your co-host here that it reminds me so much of a case I'm working on in California called Russell City, the Russell City Descendants for Restorative Justice. It was a city that was removed from the map. Mostly Black people, also Indigenous and Latin people, and they were denied resources to sustain their community so that it could be torn down and labeled a blight, and so that the city could take it. And it was near the water, just like it reminded me of that case. And I don't really have any context as it relates to like what it's like, what Black people's experience is in Canada. I would like to learn more about that. But what I do know is that white supremacy doesn't discriminate, and it is everywhere.
It doesn't have any borders.
It doesn't have any borders. And I'm realizing when I read about Africa, I'm like, it's the same play. Same over and over. It happened in Rosewood. It happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at Black Wall Street. It happened in New York City, what is now, Central Park. It is the same play throughout. And so for me, it was like, I wasn't surprised to hear about Africville. It was just confirmation that like, white supremacy is powerful and it is horrible and it is something that we have to constantly fight against. And it doesn't matter what part of the world it exists. It exists. And so the fight to rid it has to constantly exist throughout the world.
For sure.
But it is also very sad, right? It's extremely sad because I feel like there's no refuge from it. There's no place any one of us can go and be like, I just need to get away from it, because it rears its ugly head wherever we go.
It's sad to see that they wouldn't develop the land for a community to exist, for our people to flourish. Instead, they wanted to, do whatever they could to take such a valuable piece of land in this province.
Right. They didn't build it up. They tore it down. They did it by not allowing you resources that you were supposed to have, especially as taxpayers, like running sewage, all those things. And then what they decided to do is like label it a blight because they didn't provide the resources necessary and that they were supposed to, so that they could take it under the guise of, oh, well, human rights, right? It's not safe or it's not okay to live in these conditions, when they were the ones who ensured that those conditions were what they were.
In the first place. Yeah, no, for sure.
It is something that's happened out here in California too. I'm actually working with a group called the Russell City Descendants for Restorative Justice, and it's exactly the same thing. The exact same thing. They did not allow them to have the resources. They didn't have a fire department. They had to make their own fire department. Literally, fire department would come and wait until the houses burned down before. They didn't have running water, electricity, but they were Black and, Indigenous and Latin community, but predominantly Black. And they made sure that they built communities so they could provide for one another. And they lived well, and they were very tight knit. And the city of Hayward decided to take the land from 120 families under the guise of eminent domain. And they did exactly that. They labeled it a blight. They didn't provide the resources and ended up taking them out. So, removing them. So, it's the same tactic, same tactic.
And that's the shame, right? Is that it's not a localized incident. Like too many. And the even worse part about it is it's usually minority communities, whether they be, here it's Indigenous and Black. I'm sure where you are, Latin falls into that as well. Like that these are the targeted areas, It's easy to keep a people down when you use tools of oppression to put them into places that they are.
Right. And not just because of the generational harm. It's like it's present day harm. It's like constantly blocks created to ensure that people of color are not winning in any community. And I mean, we've seen communities like in Tulsa, Black Wall Street, where they were a thriving Black community and they kept the resources and dollars within the community and they were doing well. We saw it in Florida and with Rosewood. We saw it in New York with what is now Central Park. Like all of these well-to-do Black communities that did not bother anyone, but when they were thriving and doing well for themselves, then white supremacy and white supremacists came in and tore them down and burned them down and bombed them and just essentially took everything from them after they told them to, pick themselves up by their bootstraps.
Yeah.
Done that, and then constantly it's just taken away and they're having to do it all over again.
Yeah.
The next
How many times do you got to get up off the ground, right? Like, how many times you want me to stand up after being punched in the face?
But it's like, who wants to keep fighting? Like, can we get a resolution soon? And I think it means like fighting hard for the next year and getting true repair, because it's like, okay, like just looking forward to the next generation of a fight. Like, of course, your grandfather's going to pass the baton, and then you don't want to have to pass the baton to your kids and their kids. You know what I mean? At what point is it going to end?
When you go on these endeavors to, take on these cases and stuff, when you're engaging in the community, I'm sure, the general questions of like, what would you want to see come out of this? Like when your land comes back, like the feedback that the community gives you, could you touch a little on that? Like what it seems like a general consensus of the people who are displaced would like to see?
The general consensus is that if possible, they want their land back, right? And if it is not possible because someone else is taking up space who bought it legally, they're like, we don't want to displace people. We don't want to have what happened to us happen to them. So we're willing to get compensated the fair market value and compensated for whatever lost business enterprise or for how many years we did not have access to our land. But for the most part, folks want their land back. They want their land back, and I want that for them. I feel like when we think about, generational wealth and being able to pass it down and being able to close that wealth gap as it, relates to Black people in comparison to their white counterparts, I feel like owning land is a part of that, a huge part of that. When I think about, this country in the beginning of the 20th century, Black people owned approximately 15 million acres of land, but by the 21st century, 90% of that was gone. And so
how do you walk backwards in a progressing society, right?
Right, exactly. And so that's why I'm just like, progressive society is a bunch of baloney. It's not true. It is talking points people use that are performative, and it's just gaslighting. So, but for me, it's like, it's always the land back. Right. And, there are a lot of Indigenous people who are like, how dare Black people request land back? And this is all Native land. And yes, that is the case. But let's not forget that Black people are Indigenous people to this land, 1, and 2, Black people were stolen from our lands in Africa. We were forced and trafficked to these lands, forced to build up this land, and then told to pull ourselves up by our bootstrap post-emancipation with nothing. Right. And so when we finally had the wherewithal to figure out how to make sure we own land, we did legally, right? And so instead of Indigenous folks challenging Black people for fighting for land back, they need to be challenging the people who took the land from the beginning. And if they want to challenge anything, they need to challenge the fact that land is constantly being sold, right? And so it is not the fault of the people who buy the land, it is the fault of the people who stole the land.
Yeah. No, and those are all valid, very excellent points. I hear the passion in your voice. I hear the fire in your words. I love it. That's the type of stuff that amplifies me. Maybe, you just gave a really good speech about that. Maybe if you could put yourself in a position of somebody whose land was stolen, who was forced with one of these predicaments, maybe you could give us a little, a guide almost to where you would start to try to reclaim your land, what someone had stolen from you.
First I would accumulate as much proof that the land was mine or belonged to an ancestor. I would accumulate as much as possible. And I believe oral history is so significant and important. I'm not discounting that. But I know that, depending on whether or not you want to fight this in a court of public opinion or in the courts, the judicial system, unfortunately, they want to see proof and facts and they want to see deeds and all that stuff. So I would say accumulate as much information as you can. And then determine, I would also, more than anything, talk about the importance of being in community with family and there not being a lot of infighting, because that can distract and mess up everything. Everybody needs to be on board and working on this stuff together. And then I would say, digital amplification is important, right? Making sure that the media learns about your story, put it out there, requesting interviews. For our clients, what we do is we create a press release and send it out to our press contacts to see if their stories will be covered. And oftentimes they are, depending on the time and the location. And then we just keep amplifying it digitally on social media, and we encourage families to do that. And then we definitely propose activations, really taking up space on the lands that were stolen, right? And just better informing the community who was there on the ground of what happened, and engaging them and having the community help them, strategically try to get some of that land back. And then I know with the Santa Monica, it was very important for us to attend those city council meetings on a weekly basis and demand that they put the theft of this on the agenda, because a lot of these cities, what they're doing, and even counties, what they're doing is they're apologizing for past harms, but they're not following it up with anything of substance. So it's okay, you apologize. Now, when we think about reparations work, what are you going to do after that apology? How are you going to follow? What actions are you going to take to make amends, right? Because apology is not enough. And I'm not talking about performative things like plaques. And those things are important, but it's not the end.
Eddie's grandfather has been on that land protesting for
55 years.
Right? So, he's been someone who's kept it alive. But during George Floyd and during the pandemic was when we were able to set something up that allowed the representatives of different counties, towns, districts to actually hear from their own residents. You know what I mean? It was very strategic. And I love that you mentioned digital amplification. It's so important for people who are trying to create change to realize that, yes, you need to be on the city hall doorsteps, but you also need to follow that up with direct contact with individuals that are representing you. Because at the end of the day, if the only way that they keep their jobs is if their people are happy with them. And so I think that's the thing that we figured out, was that having different, citizens reach out to their counselors, the mayor, at different levels of government, actually made them on guard to be oh my God, the people that voted for me are asking for this. You know what I mean? And so
it's no longer just that little community of Africville or, the black population in Nova Scotia making noise. It's the third grade white teacher. It's the professor at Dalhousie in business law or whatever the case may be. People from all walks of life, different colors of skin. And they're all saying, hey, this isn't right. And this is something that should be addressed.
But I would also say don't discount the folks who don't live in those communities.
Right.
The pressure is good from the people who vote those individuals into office, but we've had a lot of success because we expanded. We had people from all throughout LA, New York, everywhere, saying call in, write in, and just being bombarded with letters, especially if it's national now and there's a story about it in national media,
right?
They don't want that smoke. You know what I'm saying? So I would say, it is important for the constituents to reach out to their elected officials, but there's an increase of pressure placed on especially local council members when you start having people from across the nation reach out.
So as you talked about this being a fight, this is not something that you want to be a part of in terms of you don't want to fight, you don't want to live to fight, but Tell us about what that opposition looked like when you were fighting for the land back.
I mean, it was having my life threatened. It
Wow.
was having the mayor put out dog whistles and essentially have community members come for me, by leading them to believe that I was coming for them and their land and their money. It was, my own neighbor calling the police on me and lying and say I assaulted her, and them and her being able to get a order of protection against me, without any evidence of assault. Like, it was bad. It was horrible. But that only emboldened me even more. Because I said, I was like, well, if they're coming for me this hard, then I must be doing something
When the
right.
devil's this close, you must be doing something right.
But they must not know about me. I'm born and raised in Harlem. Like, I my whole life was a fight. You know what I'm saying? And so I had been prepared for that. And so what they thought would instill fear in me and make me stop only made me go harder. So
It's resilience.
I think they learned their lesson.
No, that's great. That's good.
Have you, in your process of helping people find their land and get their land back, have you gotten to the stage with those communities where they're making plans on what to do with the land when they get it? And what are some of the ideas? What are some of the things that people in your communities have been looking for in terms of how to use the land for future quality of life and growth?
Right. I know there are folks. And so I just want to make sure that we put things into perspective. I've only gotten land back once, and that was in 2022 officially, right? I'm in the process of helping another family get land back. So it's not like this whole big thing where a lot of people are getting land back. So I can only speak to what the Bruces decided to do and what the family who is set to get their land wants to do with it, right? And I can't even speak to the current family too much because they're currently in negotiation. So I'm not supposed to really be talking about any of that right now. But what I will say is that, as an organization, as the founder of this organization, what motivates and inspires me to do this work is the fact that I want to see Black people get land back, especially land that is in white spaces that we don't take up space in. And so when we think about beachfront property and we think about beachfront communities, Manhattan Beach, Santa Monica, predominantly white neighborhoods. But there were a lot of Black people who lived in those neighborhoods, and those Black people were removed from those neighborhoods. And a lot of Black people own land in those neighborhoods. And so for me, I want to see Black people take up space in white spaces, because that's where we were before they took the opportunity for us to exist there. There's no reason why white people should have a predominant claim over, like, the water, the ocean. Who are you to decide that only your people gets to access the ocean because you can afford it? So it's stuff like that. It's like when it was convenient for white folks, you push Black people, and I read this with Africville, like they moved them to the borders of these cities and states, like close to the outskirts, right? And in most cases, that's where the water was. But when it became something that was admirable and something where people wanted to live, then they were just removed Black people and placed them wherever they chose to place them.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're cattle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what we saw when they, came forward with this revisioning process, because there was some more backroom deals going on that they probably felt if word got out that this is what was transpiring now with this new pressure put on them, a lot of folks weren't going to be happy. So it was, like you said, it was gratifying to go through that experience, but it also was a sort of higher fulfillment. Like this was something that we were supposed to do.
And it's not over yet. So curious to get your thoughts, because now that the city has said that we're going to create a revisioning process of this community, there's still no guarantee that people are getting land back. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like there's still no guarantee of that. And there's a whole consultation process that's about to follow. So from what you know in your experience,
I would keep applying pressure. Like, why stop? I mean, you got to that point, but that's not enough.
Yeah.
And, the people who voted for that revisioning process may not be in office anymore when something finally happens. So you got to strike while the iron is hot.
And so hopefully, to work your inspiration. I might need a virtual kick in the butt time to time, so we stay on them. But I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I'm sure our listeners appreciate it, that there's somebody out there that, made history. Beautiful Black woman out there making history. So keep fighting for the things that you're fighting for, because they are equally as important as what happened in Africville.
Absolutely. And one was just last word of advice is, when this thing is amplified to the point where, folks will be rattled enough to make some true change, just be aware of the divide and conquer mentality, or just the divide and conquer. Like I don't know if this is happening already, but just like the amount of infighting and the amount of divisiveness that happens when you're in movement work like this it's real.
In all honesty, that's how the community was taken. They destroyed the kingdom from within, and it sucks that happens. But like as you said, it's a familiar story, and hopefully we can bring some transparency this time around to the process and have everybody in the same room so we can have those discussions. Thank you again.
Call it out. See it happening. Call it out. Like I don't care. Like.
I do. Believe me. Yeah, I might be a little more professional on the podcast, but in those rooms, the words get said.
Okay, good. Good.
Thank you, Kavon.
No problem. Thank you guys for having me.
We appreciate it. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Yeah, well, that was great. I mean, for me, the biggest thing from that conversation was the success in getting land back. Obviously she wasn't impressed with how things turned out, but to actually know that a community that shared some similarities with the story of Africville, her property, I should say, that it was given back to those who, it should belong to.
Yeah.
So it's not an endless fight, I feel.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
To know that it's possible,
Yeah.
to know that victory in securing land back is possible is something that I think should give us a lot of hope, and for the listeners to know that what we're doing is important, what we're doing is working, and what we're doing isn't over yet.
Yeah, no, and another thing that she was speaking on when she spoke about opposition, it's good to hear that no matter, even though you're gonna, be faced with some maybe negative actions, thoughts, words, whatever the case may be, that there are people out there like Kavon who genuinely want to help people get their land back, get what's rightfully theirs. And I guess my message to the listeners on that note would be, don't be afraid to reach out or help where you can or how you can. You might be worried about how you'll be received within the community, but if you come with your intentions correct, and everything pure, even if nothing comes of it, that connection alone is going to be valuable to not only yourself, but to the members of the community that you brought it to.
100%. Setting an example for the people around you.
Yeah. We're excited to be back, Africville Forever Season 2. We're happy that you joined us on our journey from the first season, and we received profound and positive feedback. But the biggest problem was our listeners want to know how they could help. And that's typical in today's society. The unknown, it's challenging. People want to know how to help other people, but they're unsure of how to do it. So one of the best things that you could do, and a great way to help us here, would be to share this podcast with everybody in your life. And then from there, go to your own social media accounts. Share the podcast there, simply with the caption, #Africville Forever, and drop a little orange heart in there and let the people know that we stand united. Thank you all very much.